to say something while I start sharing my screen? Any words of welcome or opening?
Go, Carolina, go. Okay, then welcome everyone. This is the first part of the training for your COP. As you can see, I'm recording it, so it's going to be available on the platform we have created for you. In case any colleague will be joining the visit, or in case you want to check it later. Then the floor is yours, Dirk and Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel, are you there already?
I'm here. I'm going to be
Okay.
running the training with Dirk.
Great. And then let's get started. So this is, can you see the slides? Okay. Great. So this is what
Yes.
we want to do with you today. So today's meeting is going to focus on the different steps of the peer review, something that we started already at the May meeting, but today we're going to go a bit more into details and also do some exercises with you, so you get a clear idea about the whole process, basically. And here you see a little bit, on this slide, you see a little bit the order in which we're going to do things, which is basically chronological after a quick overview. The idea is that this follows pretty closely the peer review manual that Alexandra, I think, sent around a few days ago. So you can also have the peer review manual open on your computer and look at things there, or look at this manual afterwards, and you will see that there's a lot of similar content. And you have also the whole set of templates that were created linked to this peer review manual, and we will look at some of them today too. Of course, you can interrupt us whenever you like with your questions. This is the idea. No, we're not going to give you a presentation over the whole 2 hours. So whenever you have a question, just open your mic and ask, so we can discuss whatever your issue is.
And then next week, we are having another session on Wednesday at slightly earlier time. And that session will be to look at the baseline report from Sofia. Sofia is our first peer review visit. So we're going to look at that together as a COP in more detail, and sketch out a little bit of the agenda, perhaps what more information we might need on the city, who we might want to visit. Our colleagues in Sofia have been busy filling in their baseline report, and hopefully it'll be coming your way maybe at the end of this week, Monday at the very latest, so you can have some time to digest it before the next session next Wednesday.
So that's the program for this and the next session. And now we get started immediately with a bit of an overview of a peer review. What it is, this will sound familiar to you because we discussed it already in May. But basically, a peer review is about evaluating what a city does against the benchmark, and we have over the summer we have finalized the benchmark for this COP. So we want to go beyond just showing best practices to other cities, but also give the city feedback on how it could improve, what it's already doing well, and so on. So that's the idea, and that is something that when we prepared this project, that's some feedback that we got from Eurocities members, that they would be interested in this type of evaluation from peers. So here you go. The particular element in this project in Consolidate is that we have the city action plans, and we need to link this peer review with the action plans. This is not a straightforward link because the peer reviews are typically going to go a little bit beyond the action plans. So you're likely to receive recommendations that are not just on how to improve the action plan, but also the areas around it, the governance setups in your cities around it. But everything, of course, linked to migrant employment, which is our big topic in this COP. And here are some of the principles of peer reviews and the elements that we need for this to work. We need to have clear objectives and a structure. And for that purpose, we have created the benchmark. The benchmark with key factors that we can all agree on. They are kind of an ideal standard, but nevertheless, there are common principles that all of the 4 cities and the other peers, European Network of Migrant Women, think that they are good, they're worth striving for. We need to be honest. Be honest about what doesn't work well for this to work. And for that also, we need a bit of trust in this group. And I think the longer we work together, the more trust there will be. This is a bit the idea behind this community of practice model that we're using here. Feedback should be realistic and constructive. We need to be aware of the constraints that we're all facing. And given that we're all working on this area, we should be. That helps us. We know which problems our colleagues in the other cities are facing. Similar experiences. This is an in-depth exercise. We don't just go for one day to another city and look at some things. There's a whole framework around it with a baseline report, and then we spend 2 full days and a bit more in each city. We conduct interviews. We see a lot of people. Yeah, and we're committed to make this work, to listen to each other, and all of this should lead to quality recommendations that the host city of the peer review gets.
And just to say a quick recap on the benchmark, of course, you're all familiar by now with our benchmark. We finalized it for those who came to the meeting a couple of weeks ago. But just to recap, the benchmark is really there to ensure that our peer review, our ways of inquiry and our assessments are structured, and that we gather evidence and assess it in a quite a structured way. And so we've set a high-level standard in relation to the employment theme, and that's at the very top of our benchmark to guide us in this way. It's a sort of aspirational standard, which is a kind of ideal for us all to aim towards. And it's there on the slide in purple text. I'm sure many of you have seen this already, and I think it's pretty standard and uncontroversial. We go on to, the benchmark has key factors. Again, you'll all be familiar with this. I think it's very important because they are the ingredients, if you like, that are needed to meet this high level standard. And you'll remember on the benchmark, it's the first column. We spent quite a bit of time as a group, I feel, getting that right, because they were quite important. Remember, no city is expected to meet all of those. We've stressed that before. And the baseline report, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail, will have the benchmark in it. And it's important for cities to then self-assess themselves against those key factors. But really, the benchmark structures the peer review in 2 key ways. Before the peer review, each city will look at how it's performing against the benchmark, against the key factors, through filling in the baseline report. And then in a follow-up session, and that follow-up session for Sofia will be next week, the whole COP will review and test the city's scores. And that will allow the COP to identify which key factors we want to focus on during the visit. The second way in which the benchmark structures the peer review is during the visit itself. So during the visit itself, interviews will be held with a number of people who can reflect on the city's performance vis-a-vis the benchmark, the key factors that we've chosen to focus on. So that's just a quick rundown of how the benchmark is important to structuring the peer review, both before it takes place, but also during.
So, and here, to end this little introduction to peer reviews, is a little graphic where you see the different steps on one slide. We're now in the middle of the learning phase. We had the first training in May. Now we have another one. There's the manual, and we can, of course, also support you further in a more personalized way. We're already starting to prepare the first visit. We have the different steps, needs analysis. All of you have done that. Now Sophia is starting with a baseline report. Then we review this report as a group, define the focus for the peer review meeting, define the agenda, and arrange all the practicalities of the peer review. During the visit, we will gather evidence and present our findings to the city. And then after the peer review, there's some follow-up, a follow-up report, and hopefully some input that the city can use in its general policy setup, but also in particular with regard to the action, that you're all doing the pilot action. So, and this is a bit what we're going to look at. These last three steps of this diagram is what we're going to look at today in more detail. Actually, in particular, visit preparation and how we gather evidence during the peer review. If you have questions, just open your microphone. I can't really see this in this presentation mode. Okay. Now we start. So we start with the second step, visit preparation. What does it involve?
So the baseline report, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, is really a key part of preparing and focusing for the peer review before it takes place. And as I mentioned before, Sophia's in the process of filling in theirs. There are 4 key parts. By the way, I'm not going to bring up the template. There is a link to the baseline report there. But I'll talk through it first. The link is also in the peer review manual, so section 3.2. If you want to look at it later on, please do. But I'm going to talk through the structure of it. There are 4 key parts. The first section is context, so that's key facts about your city. And migration work, that's myself and Dirk, will fill in as much of this as we can before we send it to you. And then you can fill in any blanks, check what we've done, check that, and fill in any gaps that there might be. But a lot of that information you would have already have gathered in the needs analysis that you did before summer. Might be a distant memory now after the summer break, but you've already done a lot of that. So section 1 shouldn't be a very onerous task. The second section is the self-assessment, which is a really key part, and it's where you get to assess, it's a city's own self-assessment against the benchmark. It's laid out in the format of the benchmark that you're all familiar with all the key factors down one side. And again, I won't talk about this because you're going to see it in the next slide. But that's basically where a city gets to self-assess its performance against all of the key factors. The third section is really an opportunity for the city to consider the action plan against the benchmark. It's not a big section. It's just so that you can, having self-assessed yourself, you can also then consider how your action plan fits with the benchmark or doesn't, as the case may be. And then the last section is really a space for us as a as a whole community of practice to use in our baseline review and planning session. So that's next Wednesday's session, where there are a few prompting questions we can use to examine more closely Sophia's baseline report. As I said, there is the template of this in section 3.2 of the PR manual, if you want to take more of a closer look at it. But the key thing about the baseline report is really not to worry, because it will be sent to you well in advance of the visit. Dirk and I and our Eurocities colleagues will be there to help you fill it in. And we will have the baseline review and planning session 2 months in advance of the peer review. So it's not something that's going to be sprung on you close to the visit. Okay, so
sorry, I went too fast with the next slide.
That's okay. Dirk's keeping me on track with the timing. That's good. So what we thought we'd do now, so that we don't have 2 hours of Dirk and I talking to you nonstop, is do a little mock self-assessment. Now, what you can see on the screen here is section 2, and it's not the whole benchmark. We've just picked one key factor, which is political commitment and leadership, which we thought was pretty standard and applicable across the cities. And what we thought we'd do is do a mock exercise of filling this in. Just spend a few minutes filling in the box that has been highlighted in orange. You don't necessarily need to worry about the other boxes or giving your city a score, but just spend a few minutes if you are from a city. Obviously, if you are from the European Network of Migrant Women, you might find that a bit tricky, but if you could just spend a few minutes looking at that key factor and filling in the box highlighted in orange. We're not going to ask you for your feedback. The purpose of this exercise is not to give hard and fast answers or report back, but just to practice filling in this self-assessment bit of the baseline report. So I don't know if you all want to do this on a piece of paper or a post-it note, or if you want to do this, probably pen and paper is probably the easiest, but maybe, is that clear? Just spend a few minutes thinking about that key factor and what you might put in that box highlighted in orange.
And Rachel, maybe we can go back to talk a little bit about the structure of the benchmark that you have seen. But you see that in the second column, we explain a bit more what this actually means and why it is important, political commitment and leadership in this case. So it helps to allocate resources, it helps to coordinate and so on. And then very important in the third column, we have potential indicators, that they give you a hint on how you can do the self-assessment on these key factors. They're just examples. That's important. So how would I know that there is political commitment on migrant employment, on fostering migrant employment in my city? Here are examples. Politicians voice their commitment to provide employment support for migrants. They are aware that migrants need specific support, and they communicate to citizens and other stakeholders why it's important. These are just examples. There might be other, or there definitely are other potential indicators that can show you, yes, there is political commitment in my city, or there isn't. But they should set you up to be able then to say, okay, this is being done in my city, so I think there is something going on with regard to political commitment and leadership or not.
And I think sorry, Dirk, I think we have a question. Yeah. If you just unmute yourself, it's a little difficult sometimes for Dirk and I to see the raised hands.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question, because we're almost done with the baseline report, and we will be sending it to partners by the 13th. As we've agreed. But for example, concerning the indicators, are we supposed to like answer the question what has in this fourth column to answer the question and provide information about each of the indicators, or just the ones that are most relevant? First question. Second question, the next column, rate your city's performance. Is this just an overall rate for the key factor, or shall we divide it and indicate how we perform per indicator? Like, for example, there's 3 indicators here. Would you like us to say a few things and accordingly give like a numerical assessment for each indicator, or just one for the entire key factor?
So the last question is easy, I think. It's for the whole key factor. So just one score, and the answer is also related to what these potential indicators mean that we have there in the third column. They're not a full list of indicators. They're just examples, no, to help you understand better what kind of evidence you could use, but your evidence can go beyond this. No, they're just, we don't claim that we have covered all potential indicators for political commitment and leadership. You have to think a bit yourself. Okay, what is happening in my city? You know, what do politicians? Now here we're really talking about politicians. How do they relate to this topic? Do they speak in public? Is there a strategy maybe that is signed off by the political leaders of my city? Do they speak in public, and so on? So the second question, so the first question is already answered, I think, with this. No, you don't have to go indicator by indicator. You can choose your own indicators. You don't have to report on all of them that are here, but you should provide some evidence for it. No, you shouldn't just say, I think in my city there is political commitment and leadership, but you should say because there is this and this happening. Rachel, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think you've explained it very well. They are just potential indicators. There are 3 there, but you might have more. Maybe your political leaders allocate a certain budget. Maybe they're very active on social media. Maybe they have a regular column in the local paper where they communicate on this issue. There are lots of other indicators that might come into your head when you're filling this in. So these are really just example indicators. You don't have to follow it to the letter. If they're relevant in your city, great. If they're not, there might be other things that might sort of prove a test as to whether that key factor is present. Are there any more questions? In doing that, if you had a chance to jot down any ideas, are there any more questions that came up or issues? Because the self-assessment, it's fairly self-explanatory. We have another question, I think.
Yeah, Mania has a question, yeah.
Hello, Mania.
You can unmute yourself, Mania, if you can.
Yes, thank you. Just a general question in this employment theme. Could we have the possibility, or to ask to have representative from the companies there in the city, or to study this point, what kind of cooperation the authorities make with the companies, the private sector?
Yeah.
Because this question is very difficult even here. The discussion always happen between the authorities and the non-governmental organizations or the experts, but not with the like a relevant issue. Can we have this, or demand, or ask? What do you think?
We can. We have only picked one key factor here, as an example, but if you look at the whole benchmark, you will see that there's a whole key factor there on employer engagement. I think we've called it employer engagement or engaging employers. And there's a whole set of indicators there. And actually, our cities felt it was very important that we have something there on employer engagement. So absolutely will be, if that is a very relevant thing, and I think it is in most of our cities, we'll be exploring that, and there'll be an opportunity to ask a whole set of questions on that particular topic.
Yes, because one more comment that we have, or at least I have lots of criticism about the authorities, the employment authorities, that beside they are very, for example, in Sofia, if we have the employment office, when we make comparison through our work, for example, in Germany or in Norway, they have active role, but here, what we have seen, just bureaucracy, papers, and nothing really happened. So I am very curious to know in Sofia what kind of role the authorities have, and to see some of the private sector, because they are most of the time absent. We organize here many seminars about this topic, but they don't come really as should do.
Manya is from Finland, right? When you say here, there's
yes,
no cooperation,
exactly.
You're talking about
so
Helsinki,
yes.
no?
So
Yeah.
yes, exactly. I had to
Okay.
say Helsinki and in general in Finland, exactly.
Okay.
I see Blessing has her hand raised as well.
Okay. Concerning these key factors, I was like thinking about Italy, because I'm from Italy. I know we're going to visit Milan, and we see that many provinces and many municipalities, they have different laws in dealing with migrants. Okay, there are some provinces that are really open to migrants needs, and there are some provinces also that are very closed to migrant needs. And this actually make me to make some reflections on if we are to make, like, for example, Milan, that we are going to visit, as a point of assessment to generalize the whole Italy as a country. I'm actually thinking, how possible will it be for us to know how the level of political commitment in the aspect of employment for migrants? Because, like, for example, I am in the region of Campania region, and in Campania region, there are different regulations, internal regulations that has to do with migrants. That you see that there are some migrants migrating also in one municipality. So, excuse me, because there is a truck passing in one municipality to another because of access to employment, or because of some internal regulations that favor migrants. This is why I am making this reflection. I don't know if
Yeah, we're already getting into the it's a very good question. We're already getting into the nitty-gritty bits of these peer reviews. No, on the one hand, in the baseline report there is this context part. No, so when Sofia, for instance, now is going to do their baseline report, they talk about their context, and that includes also other levels of government. No, so they could, for instance, say the national government is not very proactive, no? Or if we were talking about Italy, Milano, they could speak about their region, about Lombardia, and how supportive or not supportive they are for their own efforts. so that we, the peers, are aware of this, no? And then we also have have a key factor on multi-level governance, no? And this would then be more about the efforts that you make at the local level to coordinate, no, to coordinate with other levels of government. Obviously, if there's nothing going on at these other levels of government, that's more difficult, no? But we take this into account in some way, these differences that you just mentioned. But it is a tricky element, no, because we are speaking of about multi-level governance context, and the cities on their own can only do that much, and we have to take that into account. Rachel or anybody else, would you like to add something? Do you have any other thoughts on what Blissing just said? In previous projects, peer review projects with Eurocities, we kind of outsourced these elements and spoke about context factors, no? To say the context here is one of a regional government or national government that does these things well or not so well and so on. But now we have this as part of the baseline report, and this is why the baseline report is pretty important for setting us up and giving us an understanding of what's going on. Okay, shall we do this little exercise now? That is really about, so this is just one of how many, 12 key factors we have on our benchmark that we wanted to use to give you a bit of an idea about this baseline report that all the cities have to do. And we chose political commitment, not because it's the most important key factor, but because we thought all of you cities can do a little mock self-assessment on this. So I don't know whether maybe we can start with Snežina, as you have probably already done it. Could you give us a bit of a hint of an idea on what you will write in your baseline report on this key factor?
Well, yeah, this is probably one of the most critical factors for us, given that the city doesn't have an integration strategy. It never had one. On the other hand, there's never been, strong political commitment to integration, except for, let's say, 2022, 2023, with, when a lot of Ukrainian citizens fleeing the war came to Sofia. And also before that, in 2015, 2016, with the first wave of refugees arriving in Bulgaria. But the measures taken both in the period 2015, 2016, as well as since 2022, have mostly been ad hoc, and in a way, they were just responses to emergencies. But whatever coordination mechanisms or resources or partnerships with, civil society organizations, employers, private business, academia have been established from 2015 until now, they have not been sustained. And this has been for both, political reasons. Since 2020, we've had 7 rounds of national level elections, with governments lasting perhaps not even 6 months. which has had a detrimental effect on local policies as well, because integration and coordination of migration is essentially in the mandate of national institutions, several of them, including the Council of Ministers. But again, with the exception of perhaps 2022, when the national government finally appointed a national coordinator for migration and integration, because this has been in national integration strategies for the past 10 years, but no government had ever succeeded in appointing a person, simply because of political disagreements, but also lack of coordination, lack of national level vision on how migration and integration could help the city in terms of demographics, in terms of employment, in terms of economy, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the reason why, again, this is one of the key factors for us, and those indicators are critical for the assessment of the city. But I'm sort of pessimistic. There's no light in the tunnel, because even the current mayor and the current municipal administration, they've been in power for almost 1 year now. No indication that this is going to be a priority. Not to mention that just about 2 weeks before the peer review visits, we are going to have another round of national elections. And I'm not even sure if at the time of the visit, when you come to Sofia, whether there will be any people from the municipality willing to even take part in the interviews. I don't expect by then that Bulgaria will have a government. I expect, again, as in the previous 4 years, long rounds of discussions and political bickering. And in this context, communication to citizens and stakeholders about migration is basically a topic that nobody wants to touch, except for nationalist parties who always make the case that migration and migrants and refugees coming to Bulgaria is, just put it this way, it is bad for the country on various levels. That's the atmosphere at national level, and that's the one at local level as well. That's the big picture, with a lot of details, but essentially that's the context for Sofia.
So that's actually really helpful, and thank you for giving us a bit of context to that. Whether you'll fit it into those 3 neat boxes, I'm not sure, but actually the baseline report, the first section on context, covers a little bit of this actually. So by the time the whole COP come to read the baseline report, your baseline report in the round, they'll have a better sense of the context. If there aren't any other questions on this, maybe we should move on. I'm a little conscious of time. So unless there are any other bursting urgent questions, again, when it comes to you to fill in the self-assessment, you can also ask questions then. So this isn't the final word on the matter. Shall we move on, Dirk, or do you want to add anything?
Sorry, I'm trying to hit the microphone key. No, let's move on then. I think we're good with time. We have maybe 5 to 10 more minutes before the break. But I guess you all understood. I hope you all understood now how the self-assessment works. No, and what the kind of information that Snežina gave us, gives you an idea on the kind of information, the things you could put here. Okay, now that was the first step. Well, it's actually your part, right? Right.
Yes, now it's for me to talk through the exciting peer review agenda. If you look at the peer review manual, there's a breakdown of each day in more detail, but I'm just giving you here what it will look like at a glance. Day one is fairly self-explanatory. Everybody travels to the city, and we have a COP meeting if there is time. If there is not time, it's really important that COP meeting takes place at the beginning of day two, and then we have a dinner. Day two, we have a COP meeting in the base room, really just to familiarise everyone with the agenda, plan who's going where, to interview whom, and for everyone to familiarise themselves with the base room, which is where everyone will meet to kind of debrief and digest all the interviews they've done. It's really important for that first COP meeting that everybody is present, whether it takes place on day one or day two, everyone needs to be present for that. The formal welcome to the city is optional if the host city considers it to be useful or desirable to have political leaders and influences to welcome the COP and kick off, in a way, the peer review process. Might be particularly useful if those same people are going to come back for the final presentation. But really, this should be a brief event. And it doesn't need to be formal with presentations, just a kind of brief welcome if you choose to do that. I should say the things in bold in this agenda are really, they're the key elements. Then, of course, we get into the interviews. We will probably have either 2 or 3 parallel interviews taking place at the same time, depending on the number of people to be interviewed and the number of peers that we have. But we should end up with at least each team, and when I say team, each couple, having at least 3 interviews to attend on that day. So in total, maybe 6 to 9 visits or interviews on day 2. Then we have a COP debrief session. This is really just to digest the information that we've gathered in the interviews. So this is for all the COP and the host city to get together to ensure that we can put all the evidence from the interviews that we have into the evidence collection tool. We'll talk about that a bit later, to kind of flag any key points that are emerging or any recommendations that might be emerging, and also to make sure the next day's agenda is very clear. Also, at that point on day 2, if we find out there's anything missing or there's a key person we really want to talk to that isn't on the agenda, I can't imagine this would happen, but if it does, that's the point at which we can flag it. Day 3 is very similar. We have a quick COP check-in, parallel interviews, a debrief session again, and then we have analysis workshop 1. I will talk about that in more detail later, but this is basically for peers and partners, but not the host city. And it's basically a chance to analyse all the evidence that we've gathered and start to tease out some general conclusions, some findings, and maybe some recommendations. It's also a really key point at which you as peers can feed in your own experiences to maybe inform some of the recommendations or the ways forward. But I'm going to talk about that in more detail later. Day 4, we have the analysis workshop 2. This is with everybody, including the host city. And that is really a chance to run by the host city what we discussed in the first workshop and work out how and what to say to the meeting with the political leaders and senior managers that comes next. And again, I'll talk about that in more detail later. The meeting with political leads and senior managers on day 4 is a really important part of the peer review. And so the only thing I'll say about that at this stage is that you might want to think about who you might want to get involved at an early stage, and possibly think about blocking out time in their diaries. If these people are political figures or mayors who have quite busy diaries, then we know the dates for our peer reviews. You might want to think about getting those dates in, maybe blocking out some of their time early on. Lots more information on this agenda in section 4.4 of the peer review manual. But for now, are there any questions on that? I think it's fairly straightforward.
Manya.
I'm curious to know about also more informative comment about the general political situation there, and if there is divided like everywhere in Europe nowadays, it would be nice to know the percentage of this division. The second thing, I would like to have more ideas about what kind of labor market in Bulgaria, what kind of job opportunities, is it industry, agriculture, services, restaurants. I would like to know this information, that what kind of job opportunity. For example, if we say Helsinki, for example, then it's maybe about the paper industry or something like that. We can talk about their country. And also I would like to know some information about what kind of success or unsuccess story about the immigrant and especially the immigrant women employment. What kind of stories they have, success or unsuccess stories until now? Did they have the? Thank you.
This is Manya. This is what we're going to talk about in the next session. No, this is a bit the generalities. Although we just heard from Snežina about Sofia, that was let's say an exception. But this is about the generalities of the peer reviews, how they work. And in the next session, we will talk about the context of Sofia. So next week, and actually starting from Friday, when you will get the draft baseline report from Sofia, you will read this kind of information that you just asked for. I hope you can wait for a couple more days for your questions to be answered.
I think Panos has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Yes, because I see that it's a more extended peer visit than we are used to. I mean, there are full days with parallel interviews. I would like to ask what is, let's say, the range of actors, let's say, in numbers that need to be involved in this peer. For example, we have full days of parallel interviews with actors that have a role, or there are external actors cooperating with the city, or they have a role in generally in our thematic area, let's say employability, etc. So how we will describe, I mean, the number, let's say. How many actors we should involve during the peer visit? More or less.
We will wait for the one-stop shop COP that will do the first peer review, and then we have a clearer idea about what is no. But I think we can do. So we have 2 full days of interviews. No, 2 full days of interviews. We can do 2 to 3 interviews in parallel. We also need breaks in between. I think we can have. This is my guess now. No, we haven't discussed this, but I think we can easily have 20 interviews over these 2 days. And that can, and we can give you more specific interviews when we information when we actually go through this and start planning the agenda with Sofia. And it should definitely, these interviews should not only be with city council people, no, it should be with migrant representatives, it could be with other levels of government, other civil society, and so on. But it's a bit, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I understood. To continue this question. So the structure of the visit is mostly based on choosing the right people to talk with, in terms of collecting the correct context, so that you can, let's say, feed the workshops following the whole process. Could the city involve also a visit to an area, to a place, or it's not, let's say, feasible to do that in these terms of agenda. I mean, interviews mean that, okay, we can call people from NGOs, from other levels of governance, from the city in general, to come to our premises. For example, here in the Migrant Integration Center, we will have a working area where we do the visit, where we do the parallel interviews. Should we also arrange, let's say, a visit for a good practice to an actor, to another service, or there is no, let's say, time to do that?
I think these are all questions we can hammer out together, maybe closer to the time. Logistically, okay, if we're looking for 6 to 9 interviews in one day, running in parallel, it might be easier for many of those to come to one place, either the base room or, like you said, in the center. However, it will really, if you feel like the peers would really benefit from going to one place to see something in action, we can really talk about how to make that possible. Because, you know, also when you go to these places, sometimes you get to hear the stories of these people, you know, you get to see things a little bit more tangibly than just doing an interview. So we can really talk about that. And I don't see why we can't accommodate that, because it really brings a place to life sometimes and an experience to life in a way that maybe an interview with a service provider might not do. So we can accommodate that. Let's keep an open mind, right?
And just to add to this very quickly, we are quite flexible. We are a lot of people. It could also be, maybe you think that it would be a nice gesture. It would make people feel more comfortable to speak at their own place. And then we can go there too. Snežina.
Yes, that's more of a technical question. We do have a meeting scheduled for the end of September 30th, if I'm not mistaken, to discuss all of those logistical and technical questions about the visit. Are we going to have the meeting or not? Because if not, I have several questions concerning the the peer reviews and logistics in particular.
Well, it's in my diary, so I will be there.
So we confirm the meeting. Okay,
yes.
good.
And I think we have a question in the chat, but I think we might have answered that. Are the interviews in one place, or the group gets to visit NGOs? So I think we've answered that, really.
And here's a bit more on that. Now we've just seen this kind of schematic overview of a peer review visit, the 4 days or 2.5 days, if you look at the net time that we spent there. And here are some more questions now that will help us to shape the agenda, to kind of fill this agenda with life. Obviously, before you speak about or to define this list of people you want the peers to speak about, it's important to know the focus of the peer review visit. No, but because we're expecting you not to focus on the whole benchmark, but on some key factors. So this will kind of shift a little, or this will be important for determining who we should speak to. And sometimes you may even say, okay, on political commitment, this person can really tell us something. Because I don't know, it's on the agenda, or this is a politician, or whatever. Rachel already mentioned the base room, a room where we can all meet, where we go after we have had the interviews, where we can discuss what we have found, and where we will enter data into our evidence collection tool. How many interviews? We already spoke about that.
Sorry,
yes.
Dirk, can I just say the base room, it's very obvious. We need to have Wi-Fi. It's really important, because when we come back and input our evidence from the interviews, it goes into a Google Doc. So if we're struggling to get Wi-Fi, it will be a really big practical problem. So I know it's very obvious, but I just wanted to stress it here again.
If it's complicated in your city, we can work around it, I think. We can share mobile internet or stuff like that, but it would be good to have it, really. As Rachel said. We spoke about constraints of interview partner and meeting places already. No, there might be a good reason to go to where they are. In general, we're quite busy. We don't have a lot of time to travel around, but there can be exceptions, no? And I think the rest, yes, just the last point is important, no? If you think, okay, this is a migrant NGO, they get money from the city council for their project, so you can be sure that they will feel under certain pressure to be really positive about your work if you're sitting in the room. So there are definitely cases where you as city representatives, as host city representatives, should not be there when we have the interviews. I don't think you have to be there in any of the interviews, but there might be good reasons for you to be there, no, to help people understand the context or to use your authority, no, to motivate people to give us good answers. But there's also the opposite case, no, that you should not be there in some cases, probably because that might. So we need to discuss this question on your concrete case. Where should somebody from the city be present and where not? From the city here, I mean really you as the teams that are working in CONSOLIDATE. So we will go through these questions with each of the host cities to plan the peer review visits, but this is just to give you a first idea. And here's a bit more how this works in practice, right?
Yes, these are just the general steps. I think you're all familiar with this now. The first step we've already covered in relation to our Eurocities colleagues have very helpfully fixed the date with everybody. Host city identifies the accommodation, as we have done with Sofia, and all visiting peers make travel arrangements as early as possible. Alexandra, I think, sent an email out with the agenda to this meeting, sort of urging everyone to make those travel arrangements and make those bookings if you haven't already in relation to Sofia. The whole COP participates in the baseline review and planning session. That's next week. We've already talked about that, and we've just said we will work with the host city to fix the agenda and finalize the details. I think we can go on to the next slide. And this is really just this is an agenda template. It's a tool to help you and us plan out the agenda for the peer review. We just put it there to flag it. It is the link to this template is in section 3.3 of the peer review manual. And there's a whole section there to guide you that is called Planning the Agenda. Yeah, I'm not going to go through it today because it's there in the document. And I don't think this is just the first page of it, but it is there to help you. And it's very helpful. It looks a little bit like the agenda I had up earlier, but with more boxes and helpful icons to kind of guide you in filling out the agenda. But that's a tool for you that's in the peer review manual.
It's a question from Panos, I think, right?
Yes.
Actually, it's not a question. It's what I have to mention something. When I don't know if it's a reality for all the cities, but for example, for us in Athens, when we are about to, let's say, to make arrangements for a transition to another European city, we usually need something practical because we need to submit not exactly the agenda. I mean, the issue is not what will happen in the context, but the days that we need to be absent from the municipality to get the approval. So we need some practical information in some mail from Alexandra, I don't know, where it will be described that we have to be in Sofia, for example, for 4 days. Because we need to take an approval. I mean, Alexandra always sends very early that prepare your arrangements because we are about to do Sofia. But the small extra thing that we need is exact dates or even a very draft agenda, actually not context at all, just to verify that we will leave, for example, that day and we will be back that day, because we need to take the approval from the municipality to move to another city in terms of a project. I don't know if it was clear what I...
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that, Panos. I will draft whatever is needed for you to book your travel. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So we have a question in the chat. Thank you, Alexandra. We have a question in the chat. Yes, the peer review manual is in the Eurocities shared drive, which Alexandra also circulated with her email for this meeting with the agenda. Please check if you haven't already. You should have already checked you have access to that. And all the resources are there. Oh, Carolina, sorry, you've already replied to that. I'll shut up then.
Patricia.
No, it's only as Panos say from Labrada, we need to the agenda to justify the travel, so it's the same. Thank you.
For Labrada.
Yeah.
Okay. That will happen very soon. And now we're a bit under pressure for the next peer review visits. We have a bit more, no time to, and you will hopefully get this earlier. Okay, I think we have reached our mini break for about 5 minutes, to give you a little time to breathe and grab a coffee. And we should meet again at 12 past, and then we will look a little bit more into the details of conducting interviews. So see you in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, I think we need to soon start. Rachel, if we do the breakout groups for 15 minutes, we should be fine, no?
Yeah.
So we say 6, 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I think people needed a slightly longer break.
From us, Dirk.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we can start, Dirk.
Okay. So thank you, Carolina, for giving me green light. Now we're going to focus a little bit on more in detail on what's going to happen during the visit, and in particular on interviewing. We have seen how the agenda is being developed before, and now, so what actually happens in the core part, which is interviewing people, no? Speaking to people in the city, to gather all this knowledge that stakeholders have about the problem that we want to find solutions to. There would be at least 2, maybe 3 people in an interview team from us peers, and they would have particular roles and responsibilities in this interview. One is the interview moderator, so that's kind of the chair of this meeting, the person from our group, who would kick off the interview, present us, and make sure that we stay on track. Now that we find out in this interview what we wanted to find out in relation to a specific key factor. Yeah, and that can be any member of the team. The second role in this interview team is the lead note taker. We should all take notes on paper, probably on computer, as you like, during the interview. But there's one person that should really make sure that everything is kind of recorded on paper. That might be the less popular task. So if there's no city peer who wants to take this role, it will be somebody from Eurocities, migration work, the European Network of Migrant Women. But we will see. So, and the other, if there are more people, they are additional peer reviewers who, of course, can ask questions. Not everybody can ask questions in these interviews. And what kind of questions, we're going to talk about this later. There's one more role, which is not on this slide, which is the person in the base room who is going to do some sort of quality control, look at the data that the people enter, and monitor that everything is going well. Maybe can also help with technical problems. So that's another role that we need to define during the visit. It doesn't have to be the same person over the whole visit, but it can also change from day 2 to day 3. Any questions on this? Should be pretty clear.
And then when you get in to do the actual interviews, always good to have an introduction. That should be done by the lead moderator, who should always introduce themselves and the project, consolidate its aims, set the scene, explain the format and the conditions under which the interview will take place. So the length, that it will be confidential, that we are here as peers, not as evaluators or judges. And what we're seeking to get really, that we're seeking to get honest responses to help support the development of local integration strategies, and a little bit about how the results will be used and presented. Now, this checklist is in the peer review manual. And although it may sound, some of the things on this list may sound quite obvious, I cannot tell you how many times I've turned up for an interview, assuming the person knows who I am and why I'm there, and they don't. They have just been told, allocate this time, you're going to speak to these people who are going to come and ask you some questions about your work. So please don't assume they know. Be prepared to give this sort of introduction to the project. It's not just important in terms of giving someone information, it's really important to set the right tone. Remember, these are people who we won't have met before. Most likely, most of us won't have met these people before, and we really want to get off on the right footing. So some reassurance is here, you know, along the lines of we're here to gather information, but as peers and with the aim of sharing learning across the cities. You know, and you can mention that they will then, colleagues from that city will be coming to visit your city. And this sort of kind of quite soft approach is really there to build trust with somebody you might not have met before, and it will really help you get the most out of their responses, and it will offset any hesitancy they might have in terms of what this interview is, what you're here for, what you're trying to do, the information you're trying to gather. So it looks pretty standard and obvious, but it's really important, not just for giving them the right information, but also for establishing some level of trust and trying to get the most honest responses from people. And there are certain types of questions that we want to include, really, to try and get a good mix of all these types of questions will really help us get the best kind of information on the key factors. So you've got open questions. These are some of the most helpful questions, and usually start with how, why, what would happen if, how would you describe? And these allow people to explain or describe things in a way that don't allow them to just say yes or no. Then you've got probing questions. These are usually follow-up questions that drill down a little bit more to get more information. So, for example, you said that this, can you explain why this happens? Or you mentioned this organization, can you tell me a bit more about their role? And sometimes you want to get a bit more information which occurs to you that the person hasn't mentioned. So how often are things done, or how something works in more detail, or who can provide that information? Then you've got clarifying questions, and they are just exactly that. They're clarifying questions used to check that you've understood or you've heard something correctly. So, for example, just to check you assess people's needs from that initial interview, or can I clarify, they're essentially two groups of users. Is that correct? You're just checking you've got that information, right? And then you've got closed questions. That should say closed questions on the slide, not closing questions. So closed questions should usually be answered with a yes or no, or in quite brief terms. So, for example, what proportion of people finish that course? Or do you measure progress on X, Y, Z? The sorts of questions you want to avoid are leading questions. And that's another way of putting words in their mouth. So, for example, do you agree that there's been very little progress in engaging the target group? You see, that's a leading question because you're leading them to say, yes, actually, there's been very little progress. And you want to also avoid long questions that have lots of little questions in them. So tell me, what type of migrant uses this, and why, and where do they come from, and how do they find out about this? And you just break up the questions. These are all really quite simple, standard common sense things, but I think it's helpful to run through the different kinds of questions so we can all ensure that we have a good mix of them when we do the interviews, so we can get the best type of information out of them. And now we're going to do a little exercise.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
And
so
we
I
can
think
actually,
that's right. Yeah.
I tell that, Rachel, just a little interruption to Carolina, that we can time maybe the group that we get after 15 minutes, that we get back automatically to the main room. Is that possible?
So you're asking me if I can do that, right?
Yes.
I have created them without timers, so now I cannot go back to the option
No,
where I
that's
could.
fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Then you can just get us back.
Yeah, the thing is also Alexandra and myself will be in 2 different rooms and we'll be the timekeepers as well. So as soon as the
Perfect.
time is up, we'll let you know and we'll come back to the main room.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assigning each one of you to your rooms.
And we just
what is
explain quick.
Okay, go.
We just explain quickly the briefing for this group.
Please. Yeah. Take your time.
So we want to, in the more or less 15 minutes, each of the 2 cities that will be in each room should have some 7 minutes to act as a host city representative that is interviewed by all of the others. You can quickly assign a moderator role, a note taker role, and ask some question about the key factor that we talked about before, political leadership, because we think it's pretty straightforward. And there you can practice everything you want to practice. You can practice how to present the project, and you can practice the different question types and how you would do this interview to find out more about the other city. That's it.
That's it. Also, just to say, it's going to be on political leadership, right, Dirk?
Yeah.
So we're going back to that topic. And again, it's just a practice. So you can, the interviewee can pretend to be the mayor or a council rep. Doesn't really matter. It's just a practice using those different types of questions that I've talked through. Really important, if the note taker can just make sure that they collect at least 1 or 2 lines summarizing the evidence, that will be helpful for our next exercise. So that's just
okay. Beam us up, Carolina.
Yeah, just one thing. I don't know why, Rachel, but
Sorry.
I cannot assign you to a room. You're the only one with this issue, of course. So if this is fine with you, your group, which is also mine group, will stay in the main room, and I will send everyone the rest to the other breakout. So this was room 2. I'm just redoing all of it because I cannot. For everyone it works, and for Rachel it's blocking. So
maybe because I'm from the UK. Brexit has extended to Teams.
So you won't be assigned. Okay. Okay, so I'm saving, and a group should be leaving the room and the rest should be staying here. Let's see what happens. Okay, normally everyone, bear with me, I'm just checking. Yeah, I think all participants.
No, we're still here.
I mean, everyone has been assigned. I can give it a try otherwise.
Otherwise, we
let's see.
stay all in the same room and we do it as a very big group, but that's fine too.
Yeah.
I can also create a separate Teams link and put it in the chat.
Apparently here it's
Okay.
moving everyone to their assigned rooms already. I mean, it's loading. Otherwise, yes, we can do a...
Here we are. Super.
Yeah, but the two of us stayed. So everyone, I mean, everyone managed to get in and we didn't manage. So they're in the rooms and we're meant to be here. It's crazy that I cannot assign you, Rachel. So
Yeah,
there's
this is
no
really
way.
weird.
Yeah.
Never mind. Is there somebody who can facilitate each group?
No, because in our group, I mean, the two of us cannot be assigned to that group. I don't know why. Do you see, Rachel, do you have the application of Teams on your laptop or?
Yes.
Do you have rooms on top?
I don't know. More actions just says view, send. No, I don't have the, hang on a minute, what's this? No, there's no option to.
And I don't even have an option for them to come back to the main room. Bear with me, I'm closing it. So they should come back here. Yeah, so they're coming back. So we should have our breakout here and the other breakout on the other side.
Fine. Okay, well, they'll just have to facilitate.
Yeah, so we're fine. So it's here. It's here. We're done. Sorry. So we in the end, I could move all of you, but Rachel and I couldn't join that room. So here we are.
Welcome back. Okay, and it's really helpful actually that some of you are together in the same room. So
yeah.
Maybe we can so we've got our Milanese colleagues together, so you can pair up, and our Greek colleagues together, you can be one couple.